and welcome to the 163rd episode of Lake of Rage, a Pokemon Trading Card Game podcast. I'm your host, as always, Kevin Clemente, aka Mellow_Magikarp. I'm joined today by a very special temporary guest host. Joining us is someone who you should be familiar with if you are not already. Someone whose website you have definitely used. And if you have not used it, my goodness, we are about to drop some knowledge about one of the best TCG resources that exists. We have the one and only Justin Basil. Justin, how you doing tonight?
I am doing great, and my cat apparently is doing great too. He's decided to greet us.
Love to hear it. Are you a cat person? Wait, no. Rapid start questions. We're gonna get there.
We'll get there.
Spoiler to one of them. It's the first time Justin's been on the podcast, so we're going to do those rapid strike questions to start us off. Then we're going to talk about some resources in the Pokemon trading card game community that exist for players, and then we're going to talk, of course, about Justin's website, which is one of the best. As I mentioned earlier, there is so much good stuff on there. There's also, I mentioned this in our pre thing, but I gotta say it at the beginning. You tweet out these great graphics and you see them misinterpreted constantly. So we're going to talk about what is the data you're actually compiling and where is it useful.
Yes, for sure.
But first things first, we're going to do those rapid strike questions. You're going to have 60 seconds to answer as many as you can. No explanations, just straight off the top of your head. Does that sound okay?
Okay, let's see how I can do.
I'm sure you'll do fine.
Try to make some records.
Question number 1, spring or fall?
Spring.
What's your favorite breakfast food?
Biscuits and gravy.
What's your favorite retro format to play?
Somewhat.
Favorite deck of all time?
Blacephalon GX before Welder.
Would you rather go to the bottom of the ocean or go to space?
Space.
Who would be your starter Pokemon?
Bulbasaur.
Watch a comedy or a drama?
Drama.
Toppings on your perfect pizza?
Mozzarella, basil, tomato.
What color sleeves do you use?
Blue.
Cats or dogs?
Cats.
Juniper, sycamore, oak, rowan, or magnolia?
Oak.
What was your favorite subject in school?
English.
What's your favorite regional to go to?
San Antonio.
Favorite holiday?
Thanksgiving.
Mario or Legend of Zelda?
Legend of Zelda.
Rate your karaoke skills on a scale of 1 to Beyonce.
-15.
That is time. You got 16. That's pretty good. That's like a B, right? You're good. Gotta ask a couple follow-ups, of course. Basil on your perfect pizza. Come on, that's too on the nose.
Well, that's where my name comes from, is my love for basil. So I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you.
You kind of chuckled at favorite regional location of San Antonio. Why?
I'm from San Antonio, so it's like an obvious choice. It's like, it's down the street, like 30 minutes down the street, but it's still down the street. So it's like, it has to be San Antonio.
You'd rather wake up in your own bed and drive 30 minutes than travel somewhere else.
Radical, I know. Radical.
And the last one, for the folks who don't know, you mentioned your favorite subject in school is English. Can you explain a little bit more about that and where it led you in life?
Well, I love English. I like to read, like to write. I'm a high school English teacher, so that's where it led me in life.
All right. For the rest of it, we'll get to Pokemon, I promise. Just fast forward 2 minutes if we have not gotten to Pokemon yet. But Shakespeare, can you please sell me and the listeners on why we learned Shakespeare?
Shakespeare is learned because he had a massive impact on the English language. He's also learned because he is the Marvel Cinematic Universe of his day. A lot of people think Shakespeare is this. No, he is. A lot of people think Shakespeare is like this highbrow, super, rich person's kind of thing, but it wasn't. It never was. It was this every person, every man's kind of thing to go in there and to watch something that was supposed to be very, frankly, low grade humor, a lot of dirty jokes, a lot of innuendo because every member of the cast was male. So you have, it's just a lot of really great fun in jokes with Shakespeare. And yes, some of it is dated. It's now been like 400 plus years for a lot of his works. I get it. But like, you get that love with something when you read something like Twelfth Night or Hamlet, and you get to understand how the world worked then and how people thought then, and compare that to how people think and work now.
So I have a couple questions off of that. That's okay. Fast forward 3 more minutes if you want the Pokemon talk.
Good Lord.
You mentioned the MCU part. So in 200 years, when we've gotten rid of the written word, are classes going to study the Marvel movies? Are we going to end up watching the Avengers Endgame parts 1 and 2 in classes in hundreds of years?
Maybe in 300 or 400 years.
Okay, we'll get there.
Yeah, maybe in 300 or 400 years.
And then second, you mentioned lowbrow humor in Shakespeare. Would it be right to say like Shakespeare plays were the equivalent of, is it like a level of like Superbad and Pineapple Express and that kind of stuff?
There is a lot of inappropriate humor in Shakespeare. Like literally one of the titles of his plays is a joke about women's anatomy. Like he is a very dirty guy. Shakespeare is very, very innuendo-tacular.
I feel like I did not learn this in English class in high school.
Probably would have been a much more interesting class if you had.
I think so. But anyway, let's get to Pokemon. For the people who are still listening to us, or welcome back if you fast forwarded a couple minutes to get past that. We're going to talk about some resources. So I do want to mention anyone who's listening to this, if you are like super ingrained in the community, like myself, and you're constantly scrolling through Twitter, you may not get a whole lot out of this episode. Hopefully you do. If you're any level below that, I think you're going to get some new piece of information or something that will be useful for you as you go into the competitive season. And if you're completely new, congratulations, you're going to get a lot of good stuff from this one. So Justin, I asked you here because not only your website, but you are very ingrained in the community. You are someone who is just kind of, it feels like you are around in the best positive way. So what are some resources you would guide people towards who are just getting into the game, or maybe trying to go from that, like, I'll go to an occasional League Cup, into I want to compete and know stuff and metagame and all that good stuff? What are some resources out there that exist?
I think the single most important research in the entire Pokemon TCG community is Limitless. Limitless is, you cannot understate how important Limitless is. You have to just understand the sheer volume of information that's available on Limitless that I could frankly never do as a single person. There are deck lists for tons and tons of tournaments. There's an online platform. The biggest issue with Limitless as a new player is you just don't know where to begin, right? But there is so much information there, and once you start figuring out how to take advantage of it, Limitless is absolutely going to be your best friend. So Limitless and just the deck lists.
And because there's an obligatory plug for Limitless, I do want to mention they have a Patreon. Anyone who's listening to this is like, I already know Limitless, I use it all the time. If you have the financial means, please sign up for the Limitless TCG's Patreon. You know, a couple bucks a month will keep that site running and keep Robin doing it, because Robin can quit whenever he wants to. He does not make much, if any, money off of Limitless TCG. So obligatory plug, if you have the financial means, join their Patreon.
Yeah. Definitely Limitless is a big one to hit. I would also recommend Trainer Hill. Trainer Hill is another very big website in terms of importance to the game. You can see a lot of stuff data-wise, how decks fare, card counts, card run percentages, all these cards. All these things are really, really important to see for the game too. So when you're making deck building decisions, that's really, really informational too. As a newer player, generally you're going to be hitting that up more for, what does the general skeleton look like for a deck? What should I be expected to run? So that when you're making these tweaks to your decks, you go, okay, well, maybe I don't take the Charizard EXs out.
It's an important card.
Yeah.
I want to mention off of that, and exactly where you were going with it. Trainer Hill has this feature where you can put in 2 deck lists, and it will tell you the cards that are in common and the cards that are individualized for each deck. And it is a lifesaver, because if you're like me, Justin, you might be exactly like this. You look at, say, Ian Robb's and Isaiah Bradner's Regidrago list, and you're like, I know they're not the same, and I don't know why. If you just copy and paste in there, it will tell you in a split second what the differences are. And then you can do that with multiple lists, right? You can also take Raz Wolpe's list, and you'll be like, okay, well, what is the difference? Because it's clearly significantly different. What is Michael Davidson's list? And that is one of my absolute favorite tools on Trainer Hill. It is a deck comparison tool where you can just plug it in and you automatically see, and you can get a lot of data from that too, as far as what are all the decks running together, like you said, the skeletons. And then where did these differences come from? If someone looks like they have a lot of space and you don't know where it came from, just shove it in with a regular list and you're like, oh, they cut all the trekking shoes from Raging Bolt. No wonder they had 4 extra spaces, right? Stuff like that.
Right. Yeah. But those, frankly, I think those are the 2 biggest helps for newer players, just because they're the broadest tools. They have the biggest brush from which you can kind of make your tweaks. And absolutely train your hill and limitless.
So I want to mention the one you did not mention is justinbasil.com.
Right.
There's a lot of good stuff on here, like a lot of good stuff. So I'm on your website right now. I want to just read off some of the things, and then I want you to tell me how many I missed just by trying to look at it.
Okay.
So you have metagames on here, like the meta decks, all the big stuff on there. You have a what's next tab for the next set. You have information about rotation. You have information about deck building. You have other tools, which is just a ton of other stuff. So you have all the stuff on the metagame, all the stuff on the next upcoming sets. What am I missing as the big overview before we dive deep into stuff?
So I don't know if it's a big overview, but I have a chunk on alternate formats. Ooh. So there's a big chunk on alternate formats, stuff like the Eternal format, GLC, etc. Lists a bunch of alternate formats. I have a Battle Academy supplement page that allows you to build decks that kind of work into the Battle Academy. So if you're playing with younger players that are trying to get into the game and you want to kind of add some variety to the Battle Academy, that's a great place to start. The decks generally are run between $5 and $10. You can pick up the cards on TCG Player with your regular orders, pick up all the cards real quick, and then just make the deck real quick. It's great to have extra decks for Battle Academy.
Do you have a link on there if someone's lazy and be like, okay, I can just click on this, it takes me right to the TCG Player for the cards?
Yeah, it goes, no, I don't. I need to work on that. So the problem is TCG Player's import is
bad.
Abysmal. It's really bad. So I have to basically manually code every single card.
Oh, that's disgusting. Right. What? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's really bad.
Okay, I want to, before we alternate formats, because again, we're a little tangent occasionally. We talked about Shakespeare. We can talk about some other stuff. I see you tweet about Eternal format. Can you give a broad overview, looking from an airplane down, what is Eternal format?
Okay, so looking from the sky, it is the unlimited format made playable via a ban list.
Oh, how big is the ban list? Is this one where it's like, I'm going to take 20 minutes learning it, or is it?
So the ban list is simple. It is a lot of cards, but once you understand the patterns in the bans, you're like, oh, it's just, of course that's banned. It's about 160 cards right now, which seems like a lot, but you also have to understand it's a 26-year card pool. It's a lot of cards that you're working with. And so most of the bans come from cards that, look, they're broken. Of course they're banned. Like most of these cards, you're looking at Super Energy Removal going, or Last and going, of course. So it's cards for the most part. It's like, yeah, of course that's banned.
Is it the Wizard of the Coast rules of like Bill is a trainer card or an item card? Sorry, not a supporter card. Or I guess Bill got reprinted, right? So that's a bad example.
Bill did, yes. So it's just like Unlimited, and that if there is a newer print of that card for trainers and special energy, whatever the newest print is what counts. So, for example, Pokemon Center from I think it's base set it's a stadium card now.
Cool.
Yeah.
Before we move on, is it a good format? Is it an enjoyable format?
It's super fun, super fun. Yeah, I wouldn't be playing it as much as if I didn't love the format. Obviously, it is my format, so I have a bias. But ask anybody online who has played it, and they're gonna, oh yeah, it's super fun. The biggest problem I have with the format is I can't stop building decks for it. Every time I turn around, I'm gonna like, oh, there's this I could build.
I assume it has to be one where like there's so many different things you can do, and there is no like it's not played by enough people that there's no like, oh, these are the only 6 good decks, that it's still wide open with all these cool creative combos, right?
There are a lot of really cool combos. There definitely are best decks in the format right now that are being observed for potential issues, to put it nicely. Like there's a Light Jolteon deck that is really, really good. Dragapult EX is extremely oppressive in the format right now. Regidrago is banned because it's much worse than Dragapult, if that tells you anything.
Okay. So Double Dragon's in format, right?
Rapid Strike Urshi. You have every dragon ever printed, so if you want it, you have it. You have double dragon energy. You have literally any tool you could want.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have your tools. Regidrago is crazy. It's great and expanded already, and you add all the extra toys from Eternal, and you're like, oh geez,
it should not exist.
Yeah, really.
So let's jump away from Eternal and let's go into the reason I assume more people are interested in this, and that is what is actually there for the standard format and, very importantly, future formats, because that's the one thing I'm using all the time for your website. I have to give a big shout out. Several of our YouTube thumbnails have come from your translations and your visual translations, so thank you.
Thank you. So the biggest thing, obviously, for upcoming cards is going to be you get the translation page for each set. So if I suspect a card is coming in a specific United States or international release, it's going to be tied to that for however long I believe it's in that set. If I change my mind, I'll update my move sets. But so all those card translations will be compiled together. If a card seems reasonably playable, or if it is a trainer card or a special energy card, so it doesn't matter if it's playable or not, if it's trainer or special energy, it will always be getting a proxy. So proxies, I'll always make them for those. So there's usually a proxy page for each set, for each release. And then there is the list version of the set list. So you can always see what cards we know about and then kind of click on whatever it is that you're interested in. And then, of course, as you mentioned, there's the visual set list where you're like, okay, well, what's actually in this set? What Pokemon do I care about? So you have multiple ways to kind of view the set for each set release. And the page I didn't even mention, my friends and I have a YouTube channel. My friends and I also sit down together and play. We try to make some decks works each set. And so we'll come up with some baseline lists to help get people started on their journey and playing whatever deck they might play for that new set.
What's the name of that YouTube channel as a quick plug?
Justin and Basil.
Perfect. So I'm curious about
nice and easy.
Kind of the back end here. How often are there cards that are not in a set that you've put up here? Because I'll look at this and I'll be like, this has to be right. Like, I'm assuming it's correct. Like, someone's put time into it. Like, are there surprises that come here and there where you're like, oop, I got to remove this because it turns out it's not in the set? Is that something that happens a lot? Or should I be continuing to trust it as much as I do?
So I keep it as good as I know it's up to date with. The earlier a set is in terms of what's been revealed, the less accurate it will be. The closer it gets to release, the more accurate it will be. That's generally how it's going to be. For the most part, it's going to be 90 to 95% right anyway. It's going to be those little things like, oh, well, they cut this card, and this card that nobody cares about. Or, oh, they added this random card. Like, one of the weirdest instances of something like this was Obsidian Flames. They decided randomly to print Arven again.
Sure, Arven's a good card. Just make it again.
Because it's a great card, but like no new art, no nothing. Just like, okay, what's also going to be in this set now? Things like that, you get missed, right? But for the most part, the set's going to be 1-to-1 or very close to 1-to-1 for what we know.
How much time are you actually putting into getting this all ready between the visual set list, the translations, the proxies? Like, this seems like a giant endeavor.
It varies week to week. Some weeks I can get by with like 10 to 15 hours. Some weeks I'm spending upwards of 30 plus hours on it. So it just depends on what I have to tackle each week.
Have you mastered the art of the visual proxy? Because yours look like the font and everything looks so good.
I don't know if they're decent. They're not intended to look real. They're just intended to look real enough. But yeah, I think I've gotten that down to the point where I can make, especially like the trainer cards, I can make them quite quickly. Because they're fairly easy to deal with.
So you're putting all this time into it. Are you seeing enough people utilize it that you're like, this is something I need to keep doing? Or is this something where like, I want this, and so I'm going to keep pushing it out there publicly for everyone else, if that makes sense?
So for the most part, this is stuff I was doing anyway. The whole site started because I was helping people out in my local league. And at the time I wasn't even a Pokemon professor, but I was helping people build their first decks. So they were coming in and they were starting at the very out. They had, that typical plastic box of random bulk. They're like, help me. That attitude every new player has, like, help me. I don't know what to do. But it got to the point where there were so many new people coming to the league. I just couldn't help them all. I couldn't help each one build their own decks individually. So I'd have to kind of spritz back and forth, and I couldn't always go into as much detail as I wanted with the deck building process. So I literally wrote out a PDF deck building guide. I wrote it out, put it all there. That got dumped onto a MediaFire page, and then I shared it on Reddit because I was like, hey, maybe other professors will find this handy too. And the feedback I got immediately was, it's cool, but MediaFire sucks. And some people were like, yeah, I've already hit the maximum downloads on MediaFire, can't actually do anything, blah, blah, blah. So like, okay, whatever. I ended up getting a Squarespace site, creating a single blog post and dumping a PDF on there. And then the feedback I got was, well, it's not mobile friendly. So I changed it to being a mobile site that held the same data in it. And then I gradually started adding stuff that I was doing anyway, like keeping up with the upcoming set lists. And it has grown to what it is now.
Do you know, like, did you have coding background before this, or is that something that you've learned from?
I took some comp sci classes in middle school, and that's what I've been going off of. So
middle school? Excuse me?
Middle school. Yeah. So that's the basis of what I have. The good thing is Squarespace mostly does it for me. I just have to override a lot of stuff to make things work the way I want it to. And that's where it gets a little more complicated. Like my navigation panes, that's all coded by me. It's everything else is a lot of the other stuff, like the main pages, generally that's just Squarespace defaults that I can mess with.
So the other part, in addition to the what's next and all that good stuff, and like I said, if you have not, and you're ever like, oh, what's the next set? What are the cards in it? JustinBasil.com is 10 out of 10. That's the only place you need to go. And you go to the Lake of Rage podcast. You have a lot of stuff on the metagame as well, and like a ton of good information that comes out here. What all do you have compiled for folks?
So you're talking about the what to play page for meta, for the standard format meta, right?
Correct.
All right. So that page is generally sorted by the top deck down to the most recently still performant deck that's been on that page at some point. And that is ranked based on the number of times that deck has made a top 8 placement.
Where?
So if it has made a top 8 placement in any tournament, online or in person, that is 50 person or more. So it has to be a League Cup that's been reported to somewhere like PokeStats. I don't go anything below a League Cup, or an online tournament that's been done on a Limitless online tournament platform with at least 50 players in the standard format in the last 2 weeks. So those are all the restrictions. And then after that data is included, all of those pieces of data are weighted by the tournament size. So a 2,000 person tournament has significantly more weight than a 50 person tournament.
Okay. Is that something you can share a little bit about the weighting process, or is this proprietary Justin Basil technology?
No, it's very, very basic. Basically, it's okay. 50%. Think of it as points, right? Let's say a deck gets 50, or it's in a 50 person tournament, and it's Blossom EX. Okay, cool. 50 person tournament. It got one placement in that tournament, 50 points. Okay. Another deck, I don't know, Cryogonal EX. I don't care really. Cryogonal EX is in a 2,000 person tournament.
Yeah.
It gets a top 8. It gets 2,000 points. So comparatively, that Blossom has a significantly smaller percentage of the meta share. Even though they both got one placement, proportionally, the Cryogonal placement matters significantly more because it was in a much, much larger tournament.
How would you... Okay, first off, you picked 2 completely random Pokemons that I'm very impressed you're able to come up with Blossom and Cryogonal as your 2 examples instead of like every other Pokemon on Earth. But how do you recommend people use this data? Because it can change pretty frequently. And I see, there's talking about this can't possibly be right, which I think you just kind of showed like there is no right or wrong. This is just numbers. But anyway, how do you recommend
it's numbers? Like it's literally just numbers. I would recommend taking, especially for the pro players, look at it, understand it for what it is, and then use whatever other data you have also. This is yet another variable that helps you understand where the meta is going. So because this is a 2-week span for this meta report, it's supposed to minimize the amount of ups and downs, right? If it were just 1 week, it would fluctuate very, very frequently. And that's what I was seeing before I started doing the graphics on Twitter, is that the data would fly all over the place in 1 week's worth of data. But in 2 weeks worth of data, it generally takes a little bit more for the data to flop all over the place. This is why, especially after deck really has a major breakout, people are like, well, why didn't X deck place really well? Because it won like 3 tournaments this week. It's like, yes, but that could just be a blip. Now, if it continues to perform, it's going to show up.
Another thing you have on these is you'll have like a tiering system, right? Like the same way you see a content creator do, like there's SA, blah, blah, blah. Where do you get those cutoffs from?
So that is loosely, I say loosely because the numbers changed very slightly a while back. It's very loosely based on having exactly 8 decks being equally performant in the meta. So ideally, if there were 8 equally performant decks, they would all have 12.5%, and that would be tier 1 because they would all be equally tier 1. And then you cut those in half or double them, and you get the next tier. So if you get up to, it was originally 25, now it's 24. You get up to tier 0 or tier S. People complain about tier 0. I don't really care. And then tier 2, you get 6%. Below that, 3%. And then anything below that is untiered.
Are you sure you're not a math teacher with the way you just broke down all those numbers? That little over my head.
I am not. I have had to explain it so many times, even on my own Discord, that I've gotten it down to a science. You're like, oh, those are such random Pokemon. Those are the ones I've used in my examples before because it's the same explanation every single time.
That's classic teacher right there.
Yep.
Like that example, I've used that for 7 years now.
Yep.
What else do you have on this website that's particularly useful? I see a couple things that we have not mentioned or not mentioned in detail yet.
Okay. Let's see what might be interesting to players here. We have noteworthy cards pages. I don't know if that's of interest or if that's what you're hinting at.
Ooh, that is a good one.
Yeah, there's a noteworthy cards page that kind of just lists out cards that have been reasonably noteworthy in their sets at release. A lot of times they'll get updated to reflect what has actually become noteworthy in the set, although generally that'll take a while. Because some cards get overhyped, some cards get underhyped, and that has to flux. But that page is under the deck building guide section, so it's deck building guide or deck building noteworthy cards. You can get to it that way. But yeah, it's just like a breakdown of all the very interesting cards for currently in standard.
There's also, I mean, it's in like that same general area, but there's a new essentials page, or the new essentials is for the post rotation, right? I think this is one I really like. What's going on here?
So new essentials is my way of letting people realize they don't need to quite panic. Because when rotation happens, a lot of newer players will start to panic. Like, oh no, I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't do this. And it's like, okay, calm down. First off, rotation isn't the end of the world. I know it feels like it, but it's not. Here are the new essentials for whatever you're going to play. These are like the core cards of whatever deck you play is going to need these. And then you have some general support for different kinds of things. Here are your gusting cards. Here's your grass support, etc., etc. So that's meant to be like a snapshot at the time of rotation. Okay, what matters?
Is there anything else you want to add before we have one more piece, but not necessarily related to the website?
Let's see here. There is so much, and I don't know where to begin. The about page, that's something nobody ever goes to.
I've never clicked on it.
I know, because nobody does. The about page exists.
What are your favorite Pokemon of each type? Grass, Blossom, Ice, Cragganol. We figured it out, chat. We got there.
There's a pattern. Woohoo!
Love to see that.
Yep.
Another thing I'm curious about. You're a Pokemon professor. You are someone who is active in the community, helping folks. You've been doing it for, it sounds like a while, even before you were a professor and a judge and all that good stuff, right?
Yeah.
What are some recommendations you would have for folks who are trying to help build a community?
I think the most important thing is going to be just learning the flavor of your community in the first place. Every community has a different flavor. Your community might be super competitive, And if it is a super competitive community, lean into that. Offer the tournaments, offer the build winner boxes, that kind of stuff. Your community might be a casual community, and lean into that if that's the case. Have the GLC tournaments, have the random, look at this cool shiny card trade events kind of stuff. That's no, in all seriousness, if that's what your community needs, then feed into that. And the biggest thing of all, and this is something that I think some leagues kind of tend to forget, is first and foremost, you are playing a game, and it is something that we have all come to love because we have a love for Pokemon. And your love for Pokemon should be a love for Pokemon, not a love of beating up on everyone who shows up. And that's I know that's hard for some people to understand.
Yes.
I know it's hard for some people to understand, but sometimes just sitting down and having a fun game, maybe you're not playing Snorlax against the new player. Maybe you're borrowing a deck from the league leader that's like the new Charizard EX League Battle deck, and you're playing that instead. It's not optimized, it's not a good 60, but it's good enough for somebody who's just learning the game to play against and to learn the basics of the game in a way that is still engaging for them, and you can still have a bit of fun with it too. So literally just being friendly is huge. And that seems obvious, I know, but just be friendly.
How do you actually go about helping some of these people? Besides, okay, first off, be friendly is great advice for not just people doing a league, but anyone playing the Pokemon trading card game. Please,
really
be friendly. But how would you actually go about helping some people who are getting, like, let's say they want to be more competitive, because that tends to be what our audience goes towards, right?
Absolutely.
How do you help those individuals?
So if you want, so in my league, generally, if they want to be more competitive, they come in with the competitive spirit, we'll call it, right? They have some homebrew deck that they've put together, or they have some league battle deck they've bought, and we want to encourage them. We want to say, okay, these are the players that you're going to want to play more against. These are the kinds of places that you might want to play if you want to get super competitive, or this is the times you might want to play. Just help them locally, because like every place has multiple leagues pretty much. At least all the big cities have multiple leagues. Like San Antonio has probably like 20. There's tons. And it feels like there's more every week. But just help them meet their goals. Figure out what it is they want to accomplish as a competitive player, because there are different brackets of competitiveness, right? Mm-hmm. Some people may just want to stomp all the locals, and that's fine. They can crush the league cups, they can crush the league challenges, but they have no interest whatsoever going to regional. They're never going to go in international championship, and they're never going to go to worlds, and they don't care. That's fine. Foster that. Have them play against a player who is a regional champion, and help them get better, so that when they go to their league cups and their challenges, they're doing great. Just that's one of the things is with Pokemon trading card game, you get better at it by playing it, and not just playing it, by playing it with people who are better than you. Mm-hmm. So have fun.
And last but not least, being a Pokemon professor, getting in there, starting a league, building a community, all that stuff. Can you, based off your experiences, sell us on that one? Why was it a decision you made? And why do you think it's a decision that other people should make?
To create a new league from scratch.
Hmm?
So I didn't create mine from scratch. I inherited mine.
Okay.
I was fortunate enough to, when I came into the game, I came back to the game after having left it around Neo. I came back in Forbidden Light pre-release was my very first in-person event back.
Nice.
And the professor there, Marty, he had already started it was a fairly small scene at the time, maybe 15, 20 people, but it existed. Mm-hmm. So I got the fortune that I got to inherit a league after he stepped away. But if I were to start from nothing now, it would be advertise to get you started. There is probably already a local player scene to some degree, and if there's not, then the store itself is probably gonna have to put in some footwork. If they sell Pokemon packs, have flyers. Let them know, hey, look, we get that the shiny cardboard is pretty, but did you know there's a game?
A lot of people don't, legitimately don't realize that there is a game attached to this.
Did you know there's a game? and that encourages people to play. It's like, oh, you have a free chance to learn how to play this game on Saturdays at 2:30. Please come down to this local game store. You're already buying packs here. You know where it is. Come learn how to play. We're happy to teach you. And you teach the first 2 people, and they teach a couple people, and it's already looking like a pyramid scheme. But you know what? Pokemon's making lots of money off of it, and everybody wins.
True. I was not expecting us to compare Pokemon to a pyramid scheme, but you know what? You're not wrong.
Hey, look, it's how it works.
Justin, thank you so much.
No, seriously, that's sorry, I'm sorry. But no, seriously, that is how it works. You get people to play, and then they're like, hey, this is pretty fun. And then they want to share it with people, and it's just how it works. Call it an infection, call it a pyramid scheme, call it whatever you want. But Pokemon spreads, man, because it's so fun and it's so awesome.
Justin, thank you so much for joining us. If the people want more from you, where can they find you outside of justinbasil.com, which they should be going to for sure for these resources?
Right. So you can follow me on Twitter at JustinBasilTCG. I am also on Threads, and I am on Blue Sky. I'm on Instagram at JustinBasilTCG. I'm on YouTube at Justin Basil. I also have a Discord, justinbasil.com/Discord if you want to go there. And I'm on Reddit technically, but I'm no longer active after they did some things to screw over third-party apps. So I'm basically not on there anymore. So if you're trying to message me on there, chances are I'm not going to respond for months at a time. And then the last thing I want to shout out is the Poke Beach podcast, which I'm part of. Every week, Water Pokemon Master and I do a weekly episode of kind of a news recap, and that's where you'll find us.
Yeah, if you've ever, because I've listened to a few episodes, if you've ever listened to Lake of Rage and you're like, why do they never talk about the news? Like, oh, this collection box is dropping, or there was suddenly this big thing, or the Van Gogh Pikachu stuff going through. Like, why doesn't Lake of Rage talk about it? Go check out Poke Beach podcast, because they cover all of that stuff. And there's some good juicy gossip, like news stories out there that
gossip, sure. Yeah.
Anyway,
yeah, I agree.
Myself, you can find me on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube at Melon_Magikarp. Rate and review the show, all that other good stuff. If you were the first time here because you clicked on the Pokemon rules and resources and you're like, I want to learn those rules, be sure to check out our back catalog of tons of good episodes as well. This has been another episode of the Lake of Rage podcast. We'll catch you all next week.